I ultimately had to watch as my sister systematically destroyed a man's career and forced him to leave town. And it all started because he tried to ruin my brother-in-law's favorite hobby. For context, my older sister, who I'll call Olivia, is married to her high school sweetheart, Leo. Leo is one of the kindest, most mild-mannered people you could ever meet. He's quiet, good-natured, and not great at standing up for himself. Which means he sometimes attracts bad actors who see him as an easy target. Because he always assumes other people have good intentions. He often doesn't even realize when he's being taken for a ride. Olivia, on the other hand, is usually pretty laid back. But she has one trigger that will turn her into a howling, vengeance-seeking force of nature, anyone treating her beloved Leo poorly. As one commenter on my original post pointed out, it sounds like their personalities complement each other very well. And that's the absolute truth. This whole story kicks off about 3 years ago. Leo works a remote white-collar job. But his real passion is his hobby as an amateur artist and craftsman. He's into wood carving, a bit of light metalwork, and detailed pen and ink illustrations. To really dive into these hobbies, he joined a local artists' collective and makerspace. And he absolutely fell in love with it. Every time I saw them back then, Leo would talk about the space and his projects with this infectious, beaming enthusiasm. His eyes would literally light up. Olivia joined too, mostly to work on her own fiber arts hobby. But she was never as invested in it as Leo was. Sometime after they joined, the president of the makerspace, a volunteer position that came with a tiny, mostly symbolic stipend, announced he was stepping down. It was a massive undertaking, since the makerspace had no paid staff. The president was a one-person show responsible for coordinating with the board, managing day-to-day operations, and chasing the grants that kept the lights on. The current president just couldn't juggle it with his full-time job anymore. Seeing an opportunity to give back to a place he'd grown to love, Leo decided to run. His job was entirely remote and deliverables-based, meaning he could work flexible hours. He figured he could post up at the makerspace with his laptop during the day to be available for members and handle the bigger responsibilities outside of his own work hours. And that's when Preston entered the picture. Preston was a recent industrial design graduate, known around the space for being flaky and intensely dramatic. He'd been a member for a couple of years, almost since the beginning. And he carried this deep-seated entitlement, feeling he should just be handed the presidency based on seniority. When he heard Leo was running, he completely lost it, complaining to anyone who would listen that this quiet newcomer was massively overstepping. This gossip eventually got back to Leo, who, in his typical good-natured way, didn't take it seriously. It also got back to Olivia, who was, of course, already irritated by Preston's behavior but decided to keep her feelings to herself for the time being. The election happened, and Preston won by a small margin. Leo was perfectly gracious about it. He congratulated Preston and went right back to his projects. Preston, however, was not so gracious. He was enraged that Leo had gotten so many votes. He openly told people he was trying to find out who had voted for Leo, declaring that they would pay. Preston was so blinded by his petty rage at not winning unanimously that he failed to see his victory for what it was, the single biggest mistake the makerspace members had ever made, and the first nail in the coffin of his own future. Many members who had passively voted for Preston were shocked and began privately expressing their regret. But it got so much worse. The makerspace had a long-standing perk where members could sponsor workshops and classes for a small fee. You just had to reserve the space on a first-come, first-served basis and give 20% of any profits back to the collective. Preston started using his new power to sabotage his perceived enemies. Leo had traditionally hosted a popular casting workshop on Wednesday evenings. Suddenly, before the sign-up sheet was even posted, all Wednesday evenings were mysteriously booked solid for the foreseeable future. Leo, still assuming the best, tried to reschedule for Thursdays. After one successful workshop, all future Thursdays were suddenly booked too. He tried moving to Tuesdays, but it was too early in the week for most people to attend. Leo was bummed out, but he was still too trusting to believe Preston was intentionally sabotaging him out of pure spite. Olivia, however, saw exactly what was happening and was trying to paint the picture for him, her anger slowly building. The final straw came when Preston decided to raise member fees. He told the people on his personal shit list that their fees were going up by almost double, presenting it as a new space-wide policy. But he made one critical, catastrophic error: he never realized Olivia and Leo were married. He probably never saw them together at the same time and was too self-absorbed to notice. So, he raised the fees for Leo and his known friends. But Olivia, flying completely under his radar, saw no change to her own bill. This was all the confirmation she needed. At this point, Olivia had steam practically coming out of her ears. She went straight to the Makerspace board, the body with the power to cite or even remove the president. She laid out the pattern of targeted harassment. The board members seemed uneasy, but they ultimately said that the president was technically allowed to set member fees, and they'd keep an eye on things. The board, wanting to avoid conflict, chose to believe the president was merely inexperienced. They were completely unaware that by brushing her off, they were not just ignoring a problem, but very nearly allowing their entire organization to become complicit in a federal crime. Olivia didn't believe them for a second. Preston wanted the prestige of being president, but he refused to do any of the actual work. The whole place was falling apart. Late notices on unpaid bills were piling up. Basic maintenance was ignored. Materials weren't being restocked. And the record-keeping was a chaotic mess. It got so bad that the previous president, the man who had founded the Makerspace and put his blood, sweat, and tears into it, quit as a member altogether. He was disgusted watching Preston run the place he loved into the ground out of sheer laziness. Leo, too, was losing his passion for it all, unable to access the space or resources he needed for his work. Seeing all this, Olivia's fury shifted from hot-burning rage to cold, strategic anger. Suspecting Preston was being shady in more ways than one, she put a plan into motion. She spent a few days being disarmingly friendly to him, sucking up and complimenting his leadership. Then, she sprung the trap. Knowing she worked as a project manager, she offered to help him with the organization's bookkeeping and records. This revealed Preston's greatest fatal flaw, his arrogance. He was so convinced of his own superiority and so lazy that he couldn't fathom that the quiet project manager offering to help was not just an easy mark, but the very person who would orchestrate his downfall. As one person later commented, Olivia was definitely lucky that Preston hadn't put two and two together about their marriage. He happily agreed and gave her full access to the Makerspace Google Sheets. Olivia bided her time. For a little while, she diligently brought the financial accounts up to date, all while maintaining her diabolically friendly facade. Then, when she had everything she needed, she calmly printed 6 copies of documents. These documents presented a side-by-side comparison of the official income Preston was reporting to her against the actual income from fees and grants, which he had no idea she was independently tracking. The proof was impeccable and undeniable. Preston wasn't just skimming money from class fees. He was actively stealing from the federal and state grants the Makerspace was receiving, which is a serious crime. She presented her 6 impeccably compiled dossiers to the 6 board members. The fallout was immediate. The board, terrified of losing their grant funding and potentially facing legal consequences themselves if news of the gross misappropriation got out, fired Preston and issued him a lifetime ban from the Makerspace. They didn't report him to the authorities, but they gave him a 48-hour ultimatum: return every single stolen cent, with the clear implication that they would report him if he failed. Panicked, Preston sold his car in a hurry and scrambled to get quick loans from friends, many of whom were Makerspace members who had no idea what was really going on. He paid the money back, but he never repaid those friends. He was now a pariah. Word traveled fast through the tight-knit local artist community, and he was effectively blacklisted from any industrial design job in the area. His degree was useless if he wanted to stay in town. About 6 months after the whole thing blew up, he moved away. Curiosity got the better of me while writing this, so I did a little searching online. It turns out Preston now lives in Austin, Texas. He's working in the food service industry, for the same chain he worked at during college. From what I can tell, aside from one unpaid internship right before this fiasco, he has never worked a single job in his chosen field. The Makerspace board learned a hard lesson and restructured the organization. Instead of a single president, they now have a panel of volunteer officers. Leo is one of them, and he's happily back to his woodworking and metal casting. His passion for the place is back, stronger than ever. And Olivia still helps out with the books. This story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about having a title or seeking prestige, but about protecting what you love. It also shows how quickly a life built on arrogance and deceit can be dismantled by one person armed with a simple, undeniable truth. Have you ever had to go to extreme lengths to protect someone you care about from a bully? Tell us about it in the comments below.